Thank you all for joining in for this very important, as Mr. Chok had said earlier as well, very important and informative discussion today. We have a stellar panel lined up today and are looking forward to unpacking some consumer-facing concerns with what I find quite a tongue twister, which is the operationalization of tokenization in the status quo. So I'm sure all of us have been having a lot of webinars and online commitments. So all of us know this term house announcements has become very popular ever since we are doing our Zoom webinars. Accordingly, we would request everybody to stay on mute unless they are speaking. We will request the speakers to limit comments to 5 to 7 minutes, and the rest will be moderated by Mr. Kulkarni, who is the Director Research at CUTS International. We will also, this webinar is being live streamed, and you may feel free to use the Q&A section, the chat section, to ask any questions you have during the course of the discussion. The moderator will duly take them into account, and they will be answered during the course of the discussion. Apart from this, it is highly encouraged to share the work that we are doing and disseminate whatever information is possible regarding this webinar and this issue, as well as other consumer-facing concerns. So with that, if I have Mr. Mehta's permission, I'll begin and explain the flow of the discussion. Thank you, Mr. Mehta. So the opening remarks shall be delivered by Mr. Mehta, who is the founder and Secretary General of CUTS International. The welcome address after this will be delivered by the keynote speaker, who is Dr. Saurabh Garg, the CEO of UIDAI. Dr. Garg took charge of the CEO or as the CEO of UIDAI in April 2021. He is an IS officer of the Odisha cadre and has over 30 years of experience at different levels of the government as well as private sector and World Bank. Among other things, he has closely worked on areas like digitalizing agriculture and has also prepared this the framework for digital payments. Apart from this, he has also worked in areas of developing urban and industrial infrastructure. Dr. Garg is an alumnus of Johns Hopkins University, USA, IIM Ahmedabad, and IIT Delhi. With this introduction, I would request after the keynote address by Dr. Garg, the panel discussion shall ensue, as well as the presentation by the CUTS team on the consumer survey findings that we have worked on. After this, the moderation will be done by Amol, and the closing remarks shall be made by me. With this, I would request Mr. Mehta to begin with the introduction and the opening remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vidushi. And let me also join you in welcoming all to this panel discussion. And I'm so glad to see that we have half our panelists are females. Otherwise, we generally end up by organizing manels, as they were called. Now, Vidushi has already introduced the topic. This is on the RBI's tokenization circular in consumer interest, as it happens. But before I proceed further, there is if you could look at your chat box, there is a request from a journalist who has asked whether he or she can quote you in what you say. And of course, we are not following Chatham House rules. This is an open discussion. So if it is convenient to all, I could tell her or him. Sorry, Advait Palepi. It's okay. Arunaji has already said okay. This is fine. Of course, as Vidushi has rightly said, there's been a lot of discussion going on, and I've been reading about these discussions, including Dr. Sharma's very insightful comments. Now, what has happened is due to the pandemic itself, the digital space has expanded hugely. The transactions have risen manifold, and this trend is likely to continue. It has been reported that India's online retail market is expected to reach US $350 billion by 2030 from the current levels of US 45 to 50 billion, and will likely to contribute more than 40% of the US 800 billion consumer digital economy. From the existing levels, it's going to be it's going to be a huge jump. And therefore, this whole issue about digital payments becomes more important. Consumers, business, and startups in Tier 2 cities are expected to push this growth. Small towns in India are likely to write the next chapter of India's startup story. Such massive uptake in digital transactions has prompted the Reserve Bank to make attempts to reduce information asymmetry and put in place robust security standards and mechanisms to reduce frauds. Some of the measures in this regard include imposing conditions for processing of electronic mandates for recurring payments, and more recently directing adoption of card-on-file tokenization. The RBI has mandated that with effect from January 1st, 2022, no entity in the card payment chain other than the token issuers shall store the actual card data. Any such data stored previously shall be purged. It is not clear if the RBI consulted with the players in the ecosystem and consumers before mandating such stringent deadlines. This is something which we had even objected to RBI, that the prior consultation process is absent, which should be restored. Now, as a result of this lack of consultation, merchants will not be able to process digital transactions in case tokenization is not operationalized by entities in the payment value chain by the end December of this month. Unless end consumers enter complete card details every time they want to make a digital transaction or migrate to other modes of payment. My colleague Siddharth will shortly talk about consumer perspective we've been able to gather in this regard. We did a wide survey, and that's what Siddharth is going to present. Now, implementation of tokenization directive without adequate ecosystem preparedness is likely to cause significant inconvenience to consumers, may increase their distrust in the digital economy, which is going to be harmful, and nudge consumers back to the cash economy. Micro, nano, and small businesses are also likely to be therefore adversely hit and may not be able to realize their potential. Moreover, new to digital consumers who had never used digital channels in the past, particularly women, number of illiterate consumers, senior citizens, and persons with disabilities are likely to face additional difficulties in entering the complete card details for every transaction, and could become susceptible to intermediary and third-party fraud. This is something which even I suffer from. It has been estimated that transactions worth 3 billion Indian rupees per month may get disrupted in such a scenario. It's a huge amount. We witnessed similar disruptions when the ecosystem was not ready for transitioning to the new e-mandate framework since 1st October, and a lot of transactions started failing. Consequently, despite the right intent, some regulatory actions may adversely impact consumers. We cannot brush aside consumer concerns like acceptable transaction costs, and thus request the regulator to take a holistic view of the matter. We are here to discuss these issues and discussing the way forward to implement tokenization in consumer interest. Let me welcome you once again and request Dr. Saurabh Garg, CEO UIDAI or Aadhaar, and a dear friend, to deliver his keynote address.
Thank you, Dr. Mehta. Thank you for inviting me, and a pleasure to be there on this panel. Though perhaps I might have a different view in the matter than what it seems from the topic of discussion. And I'll obviously giving it from the perspective of UIDAI and Aadhaar and what we have done in the tokenization over the past some time. Just to mention that Aadhaar obviously over time has now developed trust and credibility among the people, and that's why the usage that one sees, whether it's on the financial side or whether it's in terms of the number of transactions that happen. For example, just to put it on record, we have about 5 crore transactions per day. And that's the number of transactions that happen, whether it's on the AEPS system, whether it's in the PDS, whether it's in terms of various kinds of authentications that are done. So we've reached a figure of, and some days it crosses even 6 crores a day. I was asked to talk about consumer welfare in the digital space. And I would perhaps look at consumer welfare from 3 aspects. One is in terms of comfort with regard to privacy of their data. So whether the data is being used as per the consent, and whether the consent is an informed consent. So that's one aspect. The second would be in terms of the ease of delivery of service. That's in terms of convenience of the service delivery, whether it's available in the different methods that's possible, and the reliability of that service. So that would be the second aspect. And the third would be on the quality aspects, that in case there's any lapse of delivery of service, whether there's a grievance mechanism, and maybe what are the kind of value additions that are possible. So all these aspects combined would perhaps, I would call it a consumer welfare, and which is also what they would be seeking from the digital space. And there'll always be some balance between ease, security, and quality, because they could be at variance with each other. And it's a balance that has to be maintained between these aspects to ensure consumer welfare in its proper sense. I would just take this opportunity to talk of what we do in the Aadhaar system, because Aadhaar is a number which cannot be stored by the different ecosystem partners in general. We have the Aadhaar storage is only at our database, which we have a resident data repository, and that's in our data centers, and that's where the Aadhaar numbers reside, the 12-digit Aadhaar numbers, which is a random number which every resident has. In fact, now more than 99.7% of the residents, adults over the age of 18, have an Aadhaar number. We have what we call global authentication user agencies, which are very limited, and who are the only ones who are allowed to store the Aadhaar numbers in their system. And this is based on a kind of a reasonableness of the need to store their numbers. And there are a small number of such global AUAs, which are in low double digits or that are allowed. And even if they have to store the Aadhaar number, the 12-digit Aadhaar number, they can only do it in an Aadhaar data vault. And in the Aadhaar data vault also, which is, it has to be in an encrypted form. And there is a encryption key pair, a public key and a private key. The private key has to be maintained in a hardware key store, the hardware secured module, and only the public key is there. And it's only when the public key and the private key are, then you can open the Aadhaar data vault, and that's when you can get access to the Aadhaar number. So this ecosystem is available to a very select set of global, what we call authentication user agencies. For all others, for any other partner which wants to use the Aadhaar number, they are only allowed to store the last 4 digits. We call it the masked Aadhaar numbers, or the 12 digits. Only the last 4 digits can be stored by them. The first 8 digits have to be masked. And this redacted Aadhaar is what is available to them for their use. Whenever they, but at the same time, for convenience of, we have a tokenization concept. So just to put this part of the story, so very few user agencies are allowed to store Aadhaar, and even in that there are a number of restrictions on Aadhaar data vault, etc. Others can have a 4-digit mask Aadhaar. But there are two aspects of tokens that we do. And the token, one is at the resident end or the end user. We have a concept of a virtual ID. If a person is not comfortable in sharing, supposing they go to a shop and they don't want to share their 12-digit Aadhaar number because they're not sure whether that person is storing it or not. On your mobile phone, on the spot, you can generate a 16-digit, what we call a virtual ID, a token. In other words, you can generate a 16-digit token, give that token to the merchant or whoever you want to transact where the Aadhaar number is required. And that token, when it pings on our database, we are able to relate it to that particular Aadhaar number and confirm, yes, this token actually belongs to the Aadhaar number, and we can authenticate, yes, this person is so. And you can change this token, this 16-digit token, every 24 hours, so that if you have any fears of the person on the opposite side, whether that even that token can be used by them, even that can be deleted and made ineffective. So that's on the user side. And on the customer side, or sorry, on the merchant side, or the agency which is actually taking the number, whenever any customer puts in their Aadhaar number and it pings on our data center, we return a token back to that person, which is unique to that particular partner and the Aadhaar number holder. So we have the data in our databases which can decrypt that token and say, yes, this person went to this partner, and that's how they did a transaction. But the partner only has a token. So there's a token which can be generated by the resident, and there's a token on the other hand, which is with the partner, which in any case, any authentication user agency not authorized to use the Aadhaar number only gets the token from us in any case. This is not optional. Unlike the resident-facing token, which is optional, which depends on the resident, they have the option to give the token or give the Aadhaar card, a card number. But on the partner side, on the merchant side, it's always a token that the person get if they are not allowed to store the Aadhaar number. So that's as far as and this token system has been in operation for more than a couple of years by now. I suppose the Data Protection Act or the Data Protection Bill, which is presently there, probably would reinforce some of these aspects. Just the last point I would just like to say, we have these micro ATMs, 50 lakh micro ATMs across the country, where people are withdrawing cash using the Aadhaar number and using the fingerprint to authenticate themselves. None of these micro ATMs can store, they have the capacity. Number one, all of these micro ATMs are registered devices. So they are registered with our system. There's a unique number to them. And more importantly, none of these micro ATMs can store the Aadhaar. When the Aadhaar number is typed into that and it's authenticated by the fingerprint, the number and the fingerprint is converted in the machine itself into an encrypted, we call it a block, PI data block. And it's that encrypted data block which travels from the micro ATM over the system into our data center and pings back. So the user, the partner at their data centers will only get the token, and a confirmation comes at the micro ATM. But at no stage, any partner has access to that encrypted data block which carries the Aadhaar number and the data. So this system has been in operation. All the banks are operating it, and we operate on a zero trust mode. That so that everything is encrypted and it goes back. There is no local storage of any of the numbers but obviously these are all pre-certified devices. These are small devices. So that is all that I would like to say. I'm sure, given the opening comments of Dr. Mehta, I sensed there is obviously a different view, but I am not competent to talk about it. I can only talk about the tokenization that is being done in the Aadhaar system, which is in operation. So I will probably end out here. I had mentioned to Dr. Mehta earlier that I'm not able to stay for longer and to hear all the participants. But thank you so much for inviting me, and I hope you have a very interesting discussion going ahead.
Thank you, Saurabh. Vijay Chugh has raised his hand. Probably wishes to question
Doctor, just in case you don't attend the rest of the proceedings, I thought I'll just ask you a query. Is your token system tested for number of transactions per second or something like that?
We are doing
a million?
Yeah, we are doing 5 crore transactions a day.
A day, no, per second.
I won't be able to give you right away, but our systems can take 2 to 3 times 3x of that. So, but I can get you on the technical side how many transactions per second it can take.
So I think one of the issues which the merchants will be facing is the number of transactions that the token system which they are going to put in place can handle per second, because that's the volume which moves in payment systems. Okay. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. And I hope you have a wonderful discussion.
Thank you very much. Bye. And good luck for your work, and your the system itself is so fantastic. You inherited a fantastic system, which I'm sure you can do more with it.
Absolutely.
Let me hand over to Vidushi.
Thank you so much for your valuable time and insightful comments, Dr. Garg. I'll now be handing it over to Siddharth, who is going to take over with the presentation.
Thanks, Vidushi, and thank you, Mr. Mehta and Dr. Garg, for your insightful points on the subject. Let me just share my screen so that the presentation can be viewed by everyone. Please give me a second. Okay. Okay, I hope my screen is visible to all.
It is visible, Siddharth.
Okay, thank you. So before delving into the findings of the survey, I will just take a minute to discuss the sample spread that we chose for our survey. More than 1,100 respondents were surveyed in 8 states from different parts of the country. We ensured that a mixed sample spread was taken with respect to respondents from different age, gender, geographic location, and as well as education levels. Notably, we surveyed only those respondents who had stored their debit card or credit card details with at least one online merchant. Through the survey, we have tried to gauge consumers' practices and attitude towards storing card details with online merchants. Moving on to the findings now. Our survey found that consumers are more likely to store their card details with merchants they transact with frequently. This perhaps indicates that in case tokenization is not implemented by the 31st December deadline of purging card details, consumers may be adversely impacted on a very frequent basis. With respect to the graph which you can see on the screen, the blue bars show the percentage of respondents who save their card details with different service providers, whereas the blue line signifies the frequency of consumers' usage of these different services. A descending trend line is apparently visible for storing card details with different merchants, as well as the frequency of using such online services. Moving on to the next slide. Just a point here that in case somebody has a query, please feel free to interrupt and let me know. Would be happy to answer any queries or any suggestions which you may have. Anyway. On this slide, we can see that consumers were found to be aware of possible risks involved in storing their card details with online service providers. These included risks such as possible misuse of card details by service providers themselves, or the possibility of card details being hacked by cyber criminals. However, despite such risks, consumers claim to be storing their card details online. This is on account of the convenience that they get, as well as the possible benefits which they may get due to cashbacks or various offers and rewards. And most importantly, even on account of the trust which they have put on different stakeholders of card-based online payments. This indicates that consumers are making a conscious and informed choice of storing their card details with select online service providers on account of these reasons. Moving further, as a part of the survey, respondents were given a hypothetical scenario wherein it would not be possible for them to store their card details anymore with online merchants. Respondents perceive that this may lead to several challenges and risks to them in making card-based online payments. Most respondents claimed that this was likely to reduce the convenience of making card-based payments, and also a significant number of them feared risks of transaction failure due to re-entering incorrect card details for every transaction, along with risks of exposing their confidential card details to third persons if making payments in public. Such challenges and risks were found to likely to make card-based online payments inconvenient for consumers. As can be seen in the graph, a vast majority of consumers prefer to shift to alternate modes of payment, including cash on delivery wherever applicable, in case tokenization is not implemented by the deadline of purging card details. This may dent the government's effort towards enabling a digital India. Most importantly, consumers claim to prefer reducing the frequency of card-based online transactions or stopping using online services altogether, instead of having to re-enter all their card details for every transaction on various different platforms. This highlights the strong consumer preference towards storing card details online, along with the extent of adverse impact in case of lack of timely operationalization of tokenization. In light of these findings, it is recommended that RBI avoids inflicting a double blow to digital payments. We have already witnessed the adverse implications of lack of timely implementations of RBI's recurring payments mandate. A similar fate may await consumers and merchants in case tokenization is also not implemented by the proposed deadline of 31st December. Therefore, it becomes essential for the RBI to ensure complete and timely operationalization of tokenization before the deadline. However, given that RBI has only set a functional deadline for merchants to purge the stored card details, while not fixing a technical deadline for card issuers and card networks for enabling tokenization, timely implementation may not be possible. In this regard, there may be merit in adopting a tiered approach in fixing deadlines, that is, having one for operationalizing tokenization and subsequently another one for purging card details. Such deadlines may be fixed after inclusive stakeholder consultation with all relevant stakeholders, especially consumers. Notably, CUTS has also prepared a compilation of the consultation processes undertaken by other monetary regulatory authorities in different jurisdictions. The same is already available on our website, and may I request Vidushi to kindly put up its link in the chat box for everybody's reference.
Yes, I'm just doing this.
Thank you. So we will be uploading the slide deck as well on our website, and we would also be emailing it to all the participants of this webinar. We look forward to any thoughts, suggestions, or queries, feedback which you may have on the findings. We would be happy to take them up right now, or we would also be open to getting any future thoughts once you receive the slide deck and you get a chance to look at it more closely. So in case there are any thoughts or any questions which you may have, please feel free to intervene now. Okay. So may I request Amol now to kindly take over and kickstart the panel discussion with our eminent panelists. Thank you for your patience and kind attention. Over to Amol. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Siddharth, and I welcome everybody on behalf of CUTS on this panel discussion. We already have heard Mr. Mehta and Dr. Garg about their thoughts on digital payments. We also heard Siddharth on what we found from a consumer survey. The key takeaway for me from the survey findings was okay. The key takeaway for me from the survey findings was that consumers may face unintended adverse consequences, and in case tokenization deadline is in case tokenization is not implemented without ecosystem preparedness. they may shift to other modes of digital payments, which they may or may not be comfortable with. They may also shift to offline modes of payments, and more importantly, as the survey pointed out, they may also reduce the frequency of transactions. So these are some of the concerning uh, findings that we have got from the consumer survey, which we would like to discuss in more details with our stellar panel. We have representation from different stakeholder groups in our panel. Mr. Vijay Chuk is a payment sector veteran. He has worked with RBI for several years and now is a payment system consultant. Dr. Aruna Sharma has been has served as secretary with the Government of India and has also been member of several committees on digitalization by Reserve Bank of India and other government bodies. Gauri Gokhale is a senior partner in Nishi Desai. She is a known name in the technology policy circles. Ashita Regedi is with Cash Free Payments. She leads the policy and payments related work. Shrikant Lakshmanan is a known consumer advocate and also a technologist. He has worked tirelessly through his organization, Cashless Consumer, to highlight issues of consumer concern. Mandar Kagade is principal and co-founder of Black Dot Public Policy Advisors. He has worked recently with the Niti Aayog on their digital banks report. So we have representations from all stakeholder groups, and it's time to straight away dive deep into the discussion. So I'll start with Mr. Chuk. Sir, you have worked with the regulator for several years. So how does a regulation come up with this regulation? What do you think was the regulatory intent behind tokenization circular and prescribing the deadline of 31st December? And how do you see things moving forward from here, given that we are just 13 days away from the deadline? Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Amol. First of all, I'm honored to be amongst all the esteemed panelists and participants. Good afternoon, everyone. So coming straight to your question, I have been with the Reserve Bank of India for 33 years, but within a few days, I would be into my 8th year of retirement. So I retired on 31 December 2014. So I can't say I'm holding the current regulatory cap, but since there is no one else from the regulatory side, and I wish you had probably got one of those current regulators to be in the panel, it would have been more interesting to understand their mindset. But I will just try to project the mindset of a regulator. So some of the points are always indicated in the circular itself when they talk about improving safety and security of card transactions, deepen the payments and make them more efficient, ensure data privacy and security with the highest levels of encryption. So all these things are already stated. So the intent is known. Probably where the divergence takes place in understanding what is the mandate of RBI. RBI's mandate is to actually do depositor protection. So for them, anybody who holds the money in a deposit with a bank is who they want to protect. But the same person becomes a consumer for a merchant. And the Reserve Bank treats these two as different people, because it's quite possible that the consumer of services may be different from the user of the card, which could be due to frauds or, for example, my card being accessed by my family members or my son or daughter or anybody for that matter. So they make a clear distinction between the card owner, the depositor, and the consumer of services. So the whole problem is, since it's an invisible process, they want to be sure that the card owner, who's actually holding the deposits in the bank, is the man who's making informed decision regarding the usage of services and the debiting to his accounts. So that's the game plan of the regulator all the time. So in the last few years, so in fact, during my time, we used to phase out all the circulars which we were going to introduce. There were many circulars we phased out. If you look at our 2012-15 vision, it actually covers up to 2025. So there's nothing new from 2015 till today that has been done, barring the approach to regulation. So we were doing a combination of direct plus indirect regulation. So we were doing a combination, but now apparently they are moving towards direct regulation, where they want the entire ecosystem to be reporting to and licensed by the Reserve Bank of India. Now, in that process, probably merchants who we used to address circulars as participants of the system. So we issued circulars to regulated entities saying banks, non-banks, licensed entities, and system participants. Now, suddenly, those system participants become regulated entities, so they probably not be addressed to system participants. So there's a little mindset which has changed at the RBI, and probably they want to tighten the customer redressal mechanism, for which reason they have issued directions of zero liability issues, and all those instructions have been given. So that is the intent is with the zero liability clause, they want to be sure that they can have the customer's interest protected totally. So you can't go and give an instruction to a merchant. There may be 10,000, 50,000 merchants. You can't give instructions to them particularly. And it would have to be rooted in the earlier case through an acquiring bank, which was a lengthy process. So here they don't want that kind of a mess to take place. And therefore they said, let me do direct interventions here. And which is why they have played out some of these rules here. So what has really happened is the focus has shifted on cards and into mobile payments. So mobile payments have become a way of life, and they are on a trip of their own. For the card payments, some of these instructions have started coming in. And so probably card networks feel slightly pressurized in this process. So if you look at the range of circulars that have been issued, currently what is happening is some of the card networks are still struggling with data localization. Customers were given a golden opportunity to switch on, switch off their cards so that their interest can be protected. And unfortunately, in that process, 200 million people have to understand how this switch on, switch off really works. So that is also causing some kind of a friction. So what was really an assisted mode during my time of transactions was cards, and mobile, you were on your own, you had to self-educate. And in the case of cards, you didn't need to educate yourself much beyond the PIN, obtaining of the PIN. The rest was taken care of by the POS merchant. Now the whole thing has been transformed into a do-it-yourself kit. And that is putting, that is sort of drawn a thin line between mobile payments and card payments, because both have become do-it-yourself kits. With that, I'll stop and then I'll take it on when the others have spoken.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chugh. I think one of the important things which came out from Mr. Chugh's address was the phasing out of regulatory mandates and reviewing them after every few years. And that is something that is known to us as sunset clauses in better regulatory practices. And it is important that we look at restarting this practice. And we'll come to Mr. Chugh again. We have a lot of questions for him, but for the time being, let me request Dr. Sharma to provide her opening remarks. Ma'am, you have seen it all. You have been with the government and also at the RBI digitalization committees. What is your take on this circular, particularly the stringent timeline? And do you think there is some sort of inconsistency between the government's aim of Digital India and the lack of ecosystem preparedness to operationalize this circular, particularly also learning from the experience of operationalizing e-mandate framework or the ecosystem preparedness around that time? So over to you, Dr. Sharma.
Thank you.
Very right. Here, I will like to make one or two comments before I address the specific question you have asked. Aadhaar is used only for authenticating. It is not the financial transaction. The complete financial transaction will fall into your financial route of the banking between the merchant to the bank and back. So this is the way the whole system operates upon it. So therefore, what tokenization or e-mandate now that RBI is heading at, yes, it is very important that we were the first in the country to bring DBT, that is direct benefit transfer from treasury to the banks. At that time, we have to sync the IT system of all the banks, the MIS system of the various programs, and the PFMS system of the treasury. So when we were doing it, we started with a pilot with one particular scheme of Manrega because it has maximum transactions, and then graduated it to next level, and then it was multiplied to the whole country. Why I'm giving this example is by giving these deadline dates in e-mandate, what it resulted is when there was a lot of disruption which happened, and you had even somebody like New York Times across the globe making it subscription free for 8 months for people to access their newspaper or their journal online. So these kind of things offshore also were disrupted wherever you had standing instructions for payments on your debit card and credit card. And in the Deepening Digitalization Committee, we did insist upon permitting the debit cards for these standing instructions, which was not there previously. So debit card getting the advantage of standing instruction, and their population is much more, had come recently. But again, that got disrupted into this e-mandate without getting into a pilot and understanding what kind of disruptions it will cause. So it is very important to have a pilot. That is number one. Number two, the deadline, what we are talking on this tokenization, it is very good that in the name of security, when the doubts were raised by the merchants, the card on file was introduced and tokenization was introduced, and that would settle many of the concerns of the merchants. However, we must understand that they are last in queue of the entire cascading kind of an IT arrangements to be given. So first, and front more is the Visa, MasterCard, RuPay, who have to come down with the payment network, what you call it. The networks have to be ready. Then the banks have to be ready, and banks of all hues. Any bank which is capable of issuing a card has to be ready. So you have small banks, you have statutory big banks, you have private banks, you have nationalized banks. So they all have to be ready. And then in the queue comes the payment structure and the merchants. Merchants is right at the end. At this moment of time, unfortunately, even the banks are not ready. A lot of hand-holding is taking place between some specific banks, but smaller banks are still struggling to fall into the system. So unless until the entire ecosystem is ready, this kind of a deadline is not going to help. I see a logic in a deadline to accelerate the speed by which the banks will be ready, because unless until there is a deadline, it doesn't happen. So that is fine, but then we have to sort of execute that deadline only when the entire ecosystem is ready. And at this moment of time, the banks are not ready. They have not given the API to the merchants, and that is a problem. So the resultant to the consumer, which very nicely has been projected here, the apprehensions of the consumer is not just the consumer knowledge. Unfortunately, it is also what the various technical players into the system are voicing, because here multiple times entering the card is a problem. And what is it is going to do with this aggregation, it is going to create more pressure on the IT system. So you have to understand, for every transaction, if they have to issue an SMS for a standing instruction or a recurring transaction, and then you say a yes to it, and only then it gets executed, there is a pressure on the IT system. So you can imagine with millions of transactions which are happening, which Mr. Chuk did ask as to how much it can handle, there is an add-on on the IT systems. So, and in this aggregated system, which was absolutely decentralized when the merchants were handling. Second problem which is going to come to the merchant is the grievance redressal, because they are the ones who will take care of any complaint which comes, and the systems have developed over a period of time for immediate redressal. Now it will take time because it will go to the centralized system, come back, then they'll be able to analyze, place their finger as to what went wrong, and then do the corrections. So what was possible to do it immediately is not happening. In the name of security, not allowing card of file, which is being practiced across the globe, and there has been very minor incident of cybersecurity breaches into it. So therefore, whether we are using maybe a huge stone to kill an ant or something like that, or whether if it is necessary, if it is to be done, then we have to have the whole system ready. We have to have a pilot. We have to test it. Only then we should roll it down, because it is going to disrupt, and already people have started cash on delivery payments. So in this is they are moved out of the digital world. And multiple entry will, you have very rightly flagged in the opening note of Mr. Mehta, that differently abled people. Then you have people who are aged, who have entered into this because somebody helped them at the initial stages, and rest of the thing, maintaining their sovereignty and privacy, they are able to do it. Now they will be dependent on everybody. So again, their shifting to cash is also there. So in a sense, there is a contradiction on what you ask into this. So card on file has to be completely well-oiled, operational before we set in the deadline. That is very, very clear. I mean, we can't compromise on that.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma, for your thoughts. And I think one of the things that you really pointed out was testing, piloting, and then scaling up, rather than given that there's a sequential procedure involved in operationalizing tokenization, rather than forcing the ecosystem to be ready at one go. I think for better clarity and for more insights onto this, I would request Ashita to come in now and provide industry perspective in terms of what exactly is this tokenization, why should consumers care, and the state of ecosystem readiness. Another question that we have received, Ashita, is did the ecosystem not know that this, given that this is a sequential procedure, time would be required for the ecosystem to be ready? So what efforts have been made to engage with the regulator and explain to them that you would require 6 months, 8 months, or whatever time period you would require for the ecosystem readiness? Over to you. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. First of all, happy to be here. I think those are multiple questions, so I'll take them in parts. So to start with the first one, originally the 2020 payment aggregator guidelines, that's when the restriction first came in that merchants and PAs can no longer store data. Even then, there was an activity engaging with the regulators requesting that merchants, say PCI DSS compliant merchants, be allowed to continue to store, or because payment aggregators already did encrypt the data, that maybe they can continue to store it post authorization. So these were some of the asks that we had back then. And come 2021, there was an increase in the lobbying activity, which finally led to the deadline being shifted to the end of the month, the end of the year. So now I think post the recurring payments experience, now we know that the biggest priority is to get ready, to have everything ready at an infrastructure level. So that is what the ecosystem has been working towards. In terms of a solution to this restriction, earlier tokenization was suggested even by the RBI in I think around March 2021. It had suggested that this be implemented, but the problem was that the 2019 tokenization circular only permitted device-based tokenization by card networks, which was your like a GPay, which allows a tap and go payment from your mobile app. For example. So the permission for network-wide tokenization, which is card-on-file tokenization, has only come in now in September. So it is, from that perspective, it is a short deadline of 3 months to get compliant. So even now, I do believe there are industry efforts going on. But from a fintech player or a payments player perspective, our main focus is on being prepared. I think the second part of your question was, how prepared is the ecosystem? So I think I can't speak for the whole ecosystem, but for us as a company, we have recently launched Token Vault as a service. Many other PSPs have also launched services. I understand that the major banks are ready, and we are live with MasterCard and Visa, and we will also be live with RuPay soon. So hopefully it won't be as much of a disruption as is being anticipated. There will, of course, be loopholes that will emerge post-implementation, which might lead to some inconvenience, like customers having to re-enter card data. Now, the third part of your question, I think, was what exactly is tokenization? So what this essentially does is, earlier you would have your card information consisting of the card number, the card expiry date, and the CVV. So this will now be replaced by a randomly generated card token PAN, a token expiry, and a cryptogram. So the token, as we know, will be unique to the merchant, the token requester, and the card. And the cryptogram is transaction specific, equivalent to a dynamic CVV. So this will have an expiry of about 24 hours. So from a customer perspective, it is much more secure. It's a very positive step from a security perspective.
Thank you, Ishita, for those remarks and for clarifying what tokenization is and the state of ecosystem preparedness. I think one of the things that we are also hearing is that while some merchants and some ecosystem players might be ready by the deadline, but a lot of small players might be adversely impacted and they might not necessarily be ready, and therefore they might be disproportionately impacted. But to hear more about it, I would request Gauri to come in now. What is your take on the tokenization framework? Is it necessary? Is it not? Does it really solve the security problem? Could the regulator have thought of other less intrusive mechanisms? And why should consumer care? Over to you, Gauri. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is honestly my third webinar in 1 week talking on the subject. I hope somebody out there is listening. We don't see much movement coming from the regulator. We are, few days away from the deadline. So I think, day before yesterday, I had the privilege to attend another webinar organized by CUTS. And the paper that we saw on e-commerce basically focused on inclusiveness, right? And we talk about inclusiveness, we are looking at, all levels of the consumers, sellers, and all of them in the ecosystem. And in the e-commerce space, digital payment is one of the key elements for people to be onboarded overall, right? So I think the way I'm looking at this is, first of all, whether it was required. Now, honestly, I'm not a regulator. If a regulator perceived that from a security perspective, it was required, very well. But unfortunately, what I'm hearing from a technical perspective is that the same security measures that the card networks and the issuers who are now allowed to continue to store the cards actually would have been implemented even by the PAs who are now a regulated entity, right? So if you're saying that it's the same security system, then why not? So that is something I have honestly not understood. Maybe I'm missing something in the scheme of things. The second point is that overall, when we talk about security, there have been situations, unfortunately, when we were looking at earlier, when the conversations in the industry, and I don't want to name people here, but the conversations in the industry was that CV law, saw so many breaches during the pandemic, right? The data breaches, and there have been breaches, unfortunately, at somewhere in the payment scheme, right? I mean, when I say payment scheme, in the chain. But honestly, we don't know what audit was conducted, what were the real causes of those breaches, to say that now suddenly this solution is the only solution, right? Are we saying that there have not been breaches at the banks? Are we saying there have not been breaches at some other levels, right? So I'm not clear about that element. And the reason I'm raising all these issues, where even the courts have been talking about, when they look at any regulations, what is the empirical data out there? What is the mischief out there that you're trying to resolve? And then the proportionality of a regulation, right? That is the way I'm looking at this. Now, the next point I want to raise is on the consumer. When we talk about consumer, we need to recognize that it's not only the consumer as individuals, but there are businesses who are also consumers of this entire network and the system, right? And what we have noticed is the point that the merchants, and this is the feedback that we got in the other sessions that we had recently, that the smaller, so let's see the entire scheme. I think you pointed out that the banks, now if there are smaller banks who are not ready, that means their customers you are keeping out of the digital payments ecosystem, right, till the time that they are ready. So that means inclusiveness is lost overall. I'm not saying there are no other ways and means, but you have already pointed out in your report the friction that is going to create. So I'm not going to repeat that. I'm just identifying the levels where all this is going to happen. We saw that SMEs, smaller merchants, for them to get into the system, the bigger merchants may be ready, okay, but for the SMEs to get into the system, the startups to get into the system, who are the consumers of this network, we are facing the problem because they are yet to even understand what this means, right? Now, you said that last year, you said that you are, don't want them, the network, sorry, the PAs and the merchants to store the card details. You pulled that out during the pandemic year. People were busy, they were not ready with the entire system. Then in suddenly September, you're saying that, okay, now this is the solution, right? So have you even considered that, how is the system going to function in that timeline? And are you then, sort of creating a system where you're, keeping a major part of the ecosystem outside when this goes live, right? Thereby, you will lose, a lot of SMEs will lose the business. Even during the recurring, we got the feedback, the smaller players lost business. I mean, let us please recognize that, right? So I think this is where I feel, when we talk about consumer, because here the focus is at, on the consumer, I completely agree. And the last point I want to make is that, are you even having a consumer awareness? We in the past have seen excellent initiatives by the Reserve Bank of India on the OTP, right? There is so much even communication saying that don't share OTP, you are having advertisements and all of that. Where is the communication? Where only we are getting some random SMSs saying that, okay, you no longer can do XYZ. Are the people in the smaller towns, the elderly, are even understanding what it means? I don't think so, right? So suddenly you will have a situation. I was told that, some people lost their insurance payouts, during the recurring transition. So the problem is that you have not given enough time to the consumers to even understand. You have not done enough consumer education. And then you are expecting that entire country at one go, at a, click, to suddenly be ready. Seems very unreasonable. Whether it was required or not, again, I don't want to comment, because that's the wisdom of the regulator. But and I always have been giving this example. It's not like a Y2K type of a situation that come that day something is going to suddenly fall, right? Please give that time to everybody to digest, to come on board, and let the inclusiveness of the system continue seamlessly. That is the way I'm looking at this, overall picture. I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, thank you so much, Gauri. I think two key takeaways from your talk was the disproportionality of this framework and smaller players, smaller merchants, businesses, and consumers being impacted unreasonably. The second point which you really made out was on consumer education awareness, and absolutely agree. I think previously the regulators used to reach out to organizations like us to also spread awareness and also partner with consumer organizations, which is not happening in such important issues of digital readiness. Now, with this, I think I'll move on to our next panelist, Shrikant. I think Dr. Sharma wanted to say something.
Yeah, just one question before Shrikant says, because I understand the readiness which the banks are saying. Many of the banks are ready only for credit card. They are not yet ready for debit card. So we thinking that the big players are ready. I'm still not very clear about that. To what extent they are really ready. So maybe some of the people who are in technical insights can comment upon it.
Yeah, sorry, just I want to add to what Dr. Sharma said. Even, when we were going into 1st October deadlines, so many of our merchant, clients till 30th September were not knowing which banks are ready and for what, whether cross-border they were ready or not. So even what I'm trying to say here is the information. There is information, asymmetry. We don't have access to information in this information world. That is the gap we are noticing in this entire, unfortunately, the rollout.
Sure, absolutely. I think these are very, very important questions that we are also grappling with, and more importantly, as you had pointed out, there is a lack of information in the public domain. Information asymmetry disproportionately impacts consumers, and readiness. The definition of readiness, whether you are ready to for refunds, for making offers, for EMIs, for recurring transactions. So readiness might differ with the nature of transaction. We don't know if all merchants of different shapes and sizes are ready for this starting 1st January. But having said that, I'll move to Shrikant now. Shrikant, you have heard what has been said. In addition to what has been said, I suppose there are data protection and competition related issues also. And also the JPC report came out yesterday, and it intends to foster a local digital payment ecosystem. So combining what you are hearing from as policy signals and what you are hearing from industry and consumers, if you could provide your insights on this issue. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks, Amol. I'd like to thank CUTS for organizing this webinar on COFT and providing me the opportunity to share my thoughts on consumer. Firstly, as someone who has reported stored card leaks by a very large payment aggregator, as well as somebody whose card details were compromised by a merchant, and no regulatory action was taken.
We can't hear you. Can you please be a little bit loud?
Yeah, can you hear me, Amol? Is this better?
Yes, this is better.
Yeah. So firstly, as somebody who's reported stored card leaks by a large payment aggregator, as well as somebody whose card details were compromised by merchant and no regulatory action was taken after a complaint to the regulator, I welcome the introduction of mandatory tokenization in principle, as this can cover the shortfalls of scarce regulatory capacity in regulatory payments. But as Gauri just mentioned, the first and foremost consumer concern that I have is lack of awareness of this change. RBI does not even have a FAQ on its website regarding card and file tokenization, whereas it expects consumers to consent to prompts by merchants and their unknown intermediaries without knowing what the user is consenting to. I would like to bring attention that token requesters are now a new class of intermediaries in the payment value chain that gets introduced into the payment ecosystem, and they are not they are completely unregulated by the RBI and only need to be certified by card networks and issuers. So this is a regulatory arbitrage issue in itself. If token requester is necessary for a tokenization, they ought to be regulated at par with payment aggregators and gateways. And then while most of the talk has been on the save card experience and consumers have to re-enter the card numbers, There are also concerns by the ecosystem that we hear on possible glitches with delayed refunds or even credit card bill payments that happen currently through NEFT, all of which require the 16-digit number to be entered, and there is no clarity even within the ecosystem itself on the no card number storage rule, and it is bound to cause glitches more than just transacting online. On the tokenization itself, any tech upgrade is only as good as the solidness of the tech deployed, and there is a great deficit in transparency of the regulatory decisions and how they are made. To expand on this, EMVCo, the company, the payment standards company, publishes technical specifications of tokenization online, whereas we have zero information on tokenization standards that are being put in place in India, roles and responsibilities of various parties involved in tokenization. Another additional key departure from the EMV standards is that RBI has also extended tokenization to issuer tokenization besides network tokenization. The technical soundness of this regulatory choice cannot be commented upon without knowing the implementation details, which ought to be public. The standards, if available publicly, can also help us analyze how the implementation of the regulatory mandate changes the market dynamics, competition landscape, both within the card ecosystem as well as in the payment space at large. The availability of standards is also key to assess the privacy friendliness of the regulatory change, as tokenization generates more data between the various parties involved in tokenization, and EMVCo itself in its specification mentions that it doesn't deal with the privacy aspects in tokenization and leaves it to the country-specific implementation and data laws. Lastly, on the change management process of RBI and how this thing starts with a clock of the month, there can be few improvements. RBI needs to depart from setting up hard deadline dates for new changes, especially when they deal with consumer aspects. And RBI must also mandatorily have a transparent consultative process for each regulatory mandate. And there have been widespread apprehensions that the regulator is selectively favoring certain class of payment systems and regulatory actions are partisan. To allay these fears, RBI must move towards a payment system agnostic regulation, both in monitoring and policy making. And there is also a problem of lack of oversight of RBI's regulatory supervision. I'll bring two examples here. When a parliament member specifically asked fraud data about in UPI, a reply was given citing frauds happen mostly in cards, and card fraud data was shared in the parliament. And the reply was mute on UPI frauds. The RBI also allowed or remained silent in expansion of WhatsApp in UPI despite an ongoing Supreme Court case challenging the same. Such disregard towards the existing oversight bodies like Parliament and the Supreme Court doesn't come across good for the regulator like RBI, and there is an urgent need for a regulatory dispute resolution forum as suggested by the FSLRC for resolving payment regulatory and oversight issues.
Thank you, Shrikant, for those very, very sort of well articulated recommendations, and also about the insights that you gave on this framework. I would request all the panel, all the participants to please key in their questions. We are already receiving a lot of questions, and in the second round we'll take them up. But if everybody can just sort of key in their questions in the chat box. As we are coming to the close of round one, the last panelist, Mandar Kagde. Mandar, you have worked closely with the NITI Aayog in the digital banks report, and also you have been sort of keen observer of the ecosystem since last several years. How do you see this playing out, particularly for the future of digital ecosystem in the country, and how can we avoid such sort of knee-jerk reactions or lack of ecosystem unpreparedness? What are your thoughts on that?
No, Amol, thank you so much for inviting me, and I have the benefit of sort of listening to everyone, all esteemed views and panelists before, so that sort of helps my process a lot more. So I'll just jump right into it, the question that Amol asked. This is basically you take a step back and think about what payment systems are. Payment systems are what in industrial organization, it's a well-developed academic discipline. In the industrial organization, they are multi-sided markets. You have merchants on one side, you have consumers on the other. So when you want to sort of develop that ecosystem, you can't take a prescriptive approach. And this sort of informs the point about what we ought to do in future to avoid these things. So firstly, you need to move out of the whole regulatory prescriptive approach that RBI is so used to, and assume the role of a project manager. And when you think about it from a project management perspective, then basically, all these things fall as a natural corollary become apparent. One is that, you like someone pointed out earlier, I think it was Gauri or, Ma'am Sharma, that this is a phase-wise process, right? Because it's a multi-sided market. The first layer of implementation are the card networks, and the second layer of implementation are the banks. And the banks, obviously, incentives differ, tech stacks have differed, and PSBs are not famously known for keeping the tech stacks updated. The incentive compatibility for personnel there, as also the incentive compatibility for personnel in the private sector banks, because they're so compliance driven, and their DNA is not sort of technological, if I may put it that way, at a high level. There's going to be these implementation challenges. So the second thing that we ought to keep in mind when you think about it from a project management perspective is that you need to have phase-wise deadline. So basically you put a deadline for card networks to be on board, then use the sandbox effectively to sort of figure out what are those lighthouse cases, right? We talk about recurring payments as a subset of, say, COFT, or tokenization or whatever. The recurring payments is a particular use case. So you could, likewise, the COFT is basically, all-encompassing kind of regulation. Now, you would want several use cases to be tested within it: chargebacks, your standard issue, payments. Then you might have some other sort of specific instances, in terms of cashbacks and the like. So you have a regulatory sandbox. You created a regulatory sandbox just to sort of signal to the world that, okay, we basically, keeping in lockstep with the FCA and the MAS, and you're not utilizing it in a way that is the most where it could be most easily leveraged. And this is one of the instances where I think RBI's lack of imagination, which is apparent for quite some time now, it was writ large, right? I mean, they could have easily leveraged that sandbox. And someone made the point in an earlier seminar earlier this week. I think it was Ashish. I'm not too sure, but I think that is something that we ought to keep in mind going forward. Now, that is so far as from a project management perspective. I'll change the vertice here and move to a regulatory, process perspective. Right? There is a regulatory process perspective that also informs this particular situation. And I think while the RBI, since FSLRC enacted the consultation requirement and sort of adopted voluntarily by all the regulators, RBI is being compliant with the consultation process, but for some reason in this in this particular instance that was conspicuously absent. There was no consultations, or at least no public consultations with consumer groups and the like. Now, they could suggest that consumer groups are not regulated entities, and that's not their remit. And but Section 10 read with Section 18 of the PSSA is fairly wide and could be construed to give RBI the power to listen if they, if you think about it from a too legalistic perspective. Also, there is that lever available for RBI to take into account consumer perspectives. So consultation is definitely something that was missing here, and that contributed to these kind of haphazard prescriptive deadlines. And the other thing that we ought to understand is the lack of data that went into data transparency that went into regulatory process here, right? We are always told that RBI is doing XYZ things for consumer interest, but that's motherhood and apple pie, right? I mean, I could say that, and RBI is not Caesar's wife, to use that idiom. It's subject to the constitution and the laws that we have in India, and it's although we do not have a statutory mandate for RBI to make its reasons apparent, courts through writ process and the like have enabled that in the IMAI versus RBI case in the crypto context, and they've said that you need to show us, that is the summary of the case, you need to show us if that there were cogent reasons for banning in that particular case crypto services from accessing banking, and that there was no other way you could have done it, right? Or else it is hit by Article 19 mandate, so it would be an unreasonable restriction, if I may use the term of the art that is at play here. So these are the 2 or 3 things that are apparent, and I think the blowout case here, if I zoom out from here, I think it is something that payments in particular will encounter time and again, because today we have card on file technology, tomorrow we might have some other technology, and there are cyber risks emanating from all aspects. There is ransomware, there's a bunch of things happening. We are subject, this ecosystem is subject to what we might call Moore's law, right? So we need to we have both these vertices aligned. Regulatory process has to be ticker tape and transparent and accountable. Most importantly, accountable. That is what is lacking across the board here. And from a project management perspective, the RBI has to take into has to assume the role of a project manager, like one can say that it assumed in the case of UPI. But that one instance can't be extrapolated everywhere. You need to be able to do it time and time again, and to keep payment systems lockstep, and basically align regulatory objectives and consumer incentives, consumer convenience, regulatory objectives, and the broader public mission that the government of India has espoused and the Prime Minister supports, has to be lockstep, and you have to figure out a way to balance out all these 3 considerations. You can't say security is paramount, and we say security is paramount, so we put security first, and we put certain deadlines, and you have to comply with it. You have to assume the role of a project manager, and so on and so forth. Also, reiterate my views about regulatory process. Thanks so much. I'll stop here and then basically let others take it up.
Thanks, Mandar. I think those are very, very important points. So as we move into the last phase of this discussion, we have received a lot of questions for each of the panelists. And what I'll do is I'll pose one question each to each panelist, and I'll request them to answer that question and also provide their closing remarks. One question is common to all panelists is, where do we go from here? How do we ensure that tokenization mandate is implemented in best interests of consumers? So that is a common question, and I would request everybody to share their thoughts on that. But a specific question to Mr. Chugh is, there have been concerns about regulatory capacity, state capacity in terms of lack of consultation, and also lack of ensuring that the tokenization or any such mandate could be enforced by the RBI. So what are your thoughts on that? How can we ensure regulatory capacity in addition to expecting that ecosystem improves its capacity to meet with regulatory deadlines in a time-bound manner? Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much. First of all, I heard you, Dr. Aruna, Shrikant, Gauri. Everybody had an extremely valid point, and I couldn't agree more with you. So as I said, for the last 7 years, there's been a great change in the way regulations are being carried out. But the basic background for any kind of regulation has been in Reserve Bank of India. and probably I don't see something has gone missing. Srikanth has pointed some of those aspects out. One is that there is an interface with the stakeholders. So that conversation does continue. So there you have the PCI, you have the NASSCOM, and you also had individual big user cases who have approached and been granted audience at the Reserve Bank of India in respect of most of these cases. So they've been heard and they've been hearing them here. The mistake they made out here was they did not come out with a white paper, which they should have, and that would have got a feedback. And generally, if you notice, before 2014, there was nothing we did without first publishing a white paper. So the first white paper that we issued from the Payment Systems Department was the charges on checks. And you won't believe it, we got 60 letters. Every letter opposed the concept of charging checks. Now, if you look at it with from the back of your mind, I mean, looking backwards, you would say, whoever gives the feedback probably does not give the right feedback, because charging checks was the need of the day in 2012. Because here we are trying to give a digital push, which is cheaper and more economical, and you want to make checks free of cost, where the bank is incurring 70, 80 rupees to incur a check transaction. So those kind of feedbacks have also come, and there are some useful feedbacks which come, and somewhere down that balance has to be drawn. Now, I don't know, in the last 6-7 years, as I said, there have been a spate of circulars. Everybody is still is got something which is work in progress, you know. So you have the card networks struggling with implementation of certain circulars. You have the payment aggregators struggling. You have the consumers who are struggling, and now you have the merchants who are struggling. So there is hardly anybody left within the value chain who's not struggling to understand, read, and implement all these circulars which have happened simultaneously. So there is a little regulatory push. I don't know why it's taking place. Either the tempo which is created for the nation is now percolating down at the regulatory level. And therefore, even that circular, when it was issued, data localization, I mean, just to add one word like only, and that changed the entire gamut of the circular. So I really wonder who issued that circular. It was certainly not an RBI kind of a circular. So that actually set the trend. And so as I'm saying, I don't know what's the pressure on these things and what are those deadlines, as somebody questioned very appropriately. What's the tearing hurry? And why could we not do it in a smooth manner? And why could not we have broken up it into 2-3 deadlines so that the ecosystem moves methodically?
Thank you.
So I can't really answer that, but there has been a consultation process. PCI has been interfacing, merchants have been interfacing, RBI has been interfacing with most of them. I don't know whether they are not able to convince them, or this fellow is not open to discussions. I am not aware of this. But having said this, when this tokenization thing started, and let me just share this with you, long before you had heard of tokenization in 2016, 17, we actually made a presentation of replacing card on file with the tokenization. We struggled with that for 2 years, and they stuck on those device-based tokenization, and they were not willing to look at card on file tokenization. So for 2-3 years, and this whole process, suddenly out of the blue in September, it came when we had actually dumped it and said, okay, our regulator is not prone to extending it to card on file, so let's dump it. Yeah. So in fact, I told the client, please excuse me, I can't help you anymore. So whatever representations we had made, but when this circular came out, I again made a plea to the RBI saying, this is on behalf of the entire all of you out here, because each of you have represented a question and a point. Why can't RBI do this? On those very issues, I myself have made a letter as back as in last week of September or first week of October, asking them to extend the timelines now. And secondly, to review it midway and publicly declare what's the state of readiness at each stakeholder's level here. and whether a POC has been conducted, and whether the merchants are able to see. And I mean, so the whole processes should be divided into 3-4 segments, like how quickly can you tokenize a transaction when it comes through? How can you do it? How many transactions can you do? How can you scale it up? And post these operations for a merchant, what's the chargeback process which will change for him? How does he integrate with his own systems? And all these aspects I have clearly brought out. And obviously we didn't get a response, but apparently they would have read it. I'm quite sure of it. But something down the line, you guys will know better. But I would still say the question which has been raised and which we are required to address is what next? So the point is, if you keep on blaming or saying you should not be doing this, you should be doing that, it's not going to help us in the short run. So I had a chat with some of the players who are actually developing the tokenization products. I don't know, Ashita can help us on that, but most of them say we are ready. Technically, we are ready. And so if you are technically ready, what's the other aspect that you would like to bring it? Operationally, are you ready? Or will you say financially, are you ready? What kind of readiness do you say? Have you done a POC? Have you got merchants on board? But all of them. So I checked up Visa, JustPay, BillDesk, Razorpay, CC Avenue, all these people have issued press releases as back as in October, saying on basis of which they are taking a decision. And so where do we stand as protectors of consumers? What is our voice? If the payment system, people say that we are ready, and Reserve Bank says we want this system to be in place for security of the transaction as well as data protection, then where do we jump into this picture?
Sure. Thank you so much, Mr. Chugh. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Sharma. Other than the what next question, if there is a question for you, which is why can't the transition cost be bared by consumers? So why it is not acceptable for consumers to be inconvenienced in short run so that they can be benefited in long run?
Okay.
Over to you, Dr. Sharma.
Yeah. I'll be very crisp in my response. One is what step next? I strongly feel the RBI has to extend the date, and deadline should be at different levels. In the sense, first to the banks, first to the network, which they say they are completely ready, then to the banks. After the banks have met the desired results in the given deadline, then come the next stages, because the merchants in the end, after they get API, will take another 6 months. So I don't see that within a year we are in a position to go ahead and do it. So the deadlines has to be one after the other in a sequential manner, starting from the top. So if that readiness comes, and seriousness of the deadline will then emerge, and that will give enough opportunity for everybody to sort of set into it. The second question, before the second question, I'll just make a remark because Mr. Chugh mentioned about the check. Now, even the check needs to be authenticated, right? So if you issue a check, there is another layer added. You will have to authenticate it. Only then it will get materialized. So in the sense, instead of convenience, you are creating more problems and more memory line into the whole system. The question specific you asked, that why we should not pass on this cost to consumer. If you look at it under the digitization, the entire previous way of working was charging the consumer. So in the sense, we were incentivizing cash and disincentivizing digital payment. Therefore, it is very important, if you want to incentivize the digital payment more and more, you should not charge to the consumer. You have to look at it from the consumer points of view, and this is now being very clearly directed to be absorbed by the banks, because who will be the ultimate gainer into it? And that is how the whole system is designed, and which I totally agree to the RBI's thought process on this, that the cost is to be paid, the major share of the cost is to be borne by the banks, and then it flows down the line. But these deadlines have to be kept, tiered, so one after the other, so that we do achieve what we are intending at without disrupting the system and without sort of working against the digitization mission, for which the clarion call is very much there from the government, and we are moving towards it in the right direction.
Sure. If I may add, Amol, ma'am is perfectly right. In 2013-14, there was a study carried out of cost of releasing money. So they found out that cash is the most expensive if delivered at a branch, and then at the ATMs. And therefore, the encouragement to ATMs was given because it was half the cost of picking up the cash from the counter itself. So down the line, they said, move it into a digital chain, it will be cheaper for the banks. That is why the cost is passed on to them.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Sharma. Thank you so much, Dr. Chugh. So we are already overshooting the time for this, but I'm sure we can stretch it by 3-4 minutes more. Next is Ashita. There are a lot of questions for you, but if you could just clarify on the state of readiness, what does readiness mean actually for different players? Are the players ready to make successful transactions, refunds, offers, EMI? And is everybody ready? And if players are not ready, then why are they issuing press releases that they are ready to operationalize this by 1st of January? Thank you so much.
Yes, so like I said earlier, I cannot comment on the rest of the ecosystem. I can comment only about cash-freeze position. So like I said, we do have a solution that is in place. I mean, the way I'm looking at it is the conversation that I was having with the product and the banking team, say back in October versus now. So there are a number of problems which earlier they had absolutely no idea what to do, and now they're saying that solutions are in place. So for example, refunds and chargebacks. So what happens basically is that a solution like instant refunds, which is basically a payout to the card that was happening. So now that doesn't happen. So you go back to the old processes which is in the form of a transaction reversal, which relies on the transaction ID and not the card data. So refunds and chargebacks can continue. Something like bin-based offers, which is a discount on a specific bank card. This used to rely on bin eligible lists. So now the card networks have introduced bin to token mapping to resolve that problem. So like card-based EMIs were based on files that were shared with the banks, which included details of the customer and the card data. So now the banks have started to introduce new file formats, which work on other details like the transaction ID and other identifying information to convert a given card transaction into EMIs. I think guest checkouts was another problem, but which seemed to be a problem, but now it's understood that it's not really impacted. So I don't know about the entire ecosystem at an ecosystem-wide level, what problems will arise. As a company, like from a development perspective, we are ready. There are certain issues that are coming up from time to time, but we still have 2 weeks. So hopefully a resolution will be there all around also.
Sure. Thank you so much, Ashita. I think there is a question by Parth. Parth, can you please shoot your question, but please be brief. Can we unmute Parth? Or if you can type your question.
Yeah, that might be a bit difficult. I mean, perhaps Parth would have to just text in his question to us, and then maybe we can just read it out.
So till Parth is able to key in his question. Gauri, over to you. What next? How do we move from here? Thanks.
I think first, maybe I should have said this before. It is, you have made certain things to say that you cannot store cards and you need to implement X, Y, Z, but it has not been mandated to the card networks and banks to provide the solution, right? Where is RBI saying that each and every networks and the banks are supposed to give this solution? There is no such mandate, right? Now, whether that can be reconsidered so that there is a mandate provided to them. Number two, FAQ from the Reserve Bank of India will be extremely important, because there are several issues, for example, on data purging, on consents, and so many other small elements, because you have 3-4 different documents that you need to refer to, 2019, then 2020, then FAQ, earlier FAQ, now this August something and September something. So can we have either a master direction or an FAQ? And the last is, of course, the consumer awareness, which I want to, sort of underline one more time to sort of educate the entire system. If we can take these 3 steps in addition to, of course, the extension of timeline, that's a given. I mean, I don't want to sort of repeat that, but if these 3 additional points can be considered, that will be great.
Sure, thank you, Gauri. Parth has written his question. We are in the process of integration. The readiness of our gateways are still under development. So can we expect some delay in the deadline? We are hoping for that, Parth. I guess there is nothing much to say over there. But to Shrikant, I think you had highlighted a lot of recommendations for the Reserve Bank in your opening remarks. What is the priority for you from a consumer point of view?
So from a consumer point of view, I think awareness is the key thing that needs to be there. As Gauri mentioned, there has to be an FAQ, and failing which we can still put up our own FAQ. Like we can read and generate that awareness and knowledge base around tokenization from what we can source. And that is possibly one priority. And the other one is that consumers should also be aware of there are other ways and means of entering card details. Now, every modern browser today has ability to store card details. So you don't necessarily need to rely on a card on file tokenization. You could actually store your card on your browser, and there are reasonable practices, security practices against that as well. So this is again another aspect which people will eventually figure it out, and they will start using that as well. If the COFT is cumbersome or is not working for them.
Thanks, Shrikant. I think, Ashita, there is another question for you on guest checkouts. If you could just take that. If you want to respond in writing, you can do that, or if you could just speak now.
Okay, so guest checkouts is a bit confusing. The latest information I have is that it is unimpacted, that it would used to work previously based on a transaction ID because of customers choosing not to save the data. Some people have also said that the RBI has been requested for some clarity in case certain players need to store the card data for some legs of the transaction, maybe not entirely. But the main understanding I have is that it will work on the transaction ID, so there's no impact.
Thanks, Ashita. Mandar, last word from you.
Yeah, I think most of the comments that that have been previously made are sufficient, but I'll just sort of hence I think firstly it's tried that the deadline, quote unquote deadline, there is no such deadline. It's not a Y2K kind of emergency or otherwise, we are not hitting Armageddon kind of territory. So that needs to go. And that can go as of Monday, right? I mean, essentially because it's fairly clear now that the long tail of merchants is not yet tokenized, and so are some of the system participants that are lower. I think I recall from my own HDFC experience that about 33 odd merchants, which are all the large big box merchants as they are called in the US, so to speak, right? The large merchants are onboarded and perhaps compliant, but not the other. So basically, that is one A. Secondly, in terms of implementation of this mandate, assuming a project manager role and echoing what Ma'am Sharma said earlier, and she's vastly experienced in this process. I think RBI might want to talk to her, phase out deadlines and sort of mandate it in terms of, let's say, who might take the longest time. The long tail of merchants will take the longest time, to sort of accordingly apportion a section of time for them, and correspondingly for the intermediate players, like the upstream players. The most downstream is clearly the merchant, and we should sort of devote a lot more time for that. Proportionately lower times, I guess, as we move upstream. Right, that is the second one. Third, from a regulatory process perspective, we are subject to Moore's law in this ecosystem. high time the RBI learns that this is not, vigilante kind of activism, regulatory activism is not going to get them anywhere. This is the 21st century. This is not your 9-to-5 banking, that the 20th century regulator would know. This is a very different kind of banking, and they need a more ecosystem, inclusive approach, if I may call it that, taking in the whole ecosystem together, and therefore, consultation processes and others have to be lockstep with that market reality. I think these are the three main points going forward that we should remember. 2 points touching upon the immediate system, and the third one, a blowout point like zooming out, which will help us sort of navigate the next, say, decade of payments revolution in this country.
Thank you so much, Mandar. And before I hand it over to Vidushi to do the closing, just a small factoid is after the e-mandate recurring framework came into being, since October 1, in public domain, the information which is available is like this, that on HDFC there are only 33 merchants which are live. On tokenization, we do not have any information as yet, and there are 0. So there is high chances of repeating the same mistakes that we saw in recurring payments, and we should avoid it at all costs. So with that, a personal thank you to all the panelists, and over to Vidushi for closing remarks.
Thank you so much, Amol. Thank you. A big thank you to all the speakers and our audience for being extremely patient and listening in throughout the webinar, and also participating actively by sending us so many questions. The discussion has definitely been invigorating and has left us with a lot of food for thought. While highlighting consumer welfare, 2 elements have been identified: informed consent, and secondly, convenience in the delivery of services. With this background, the conversations have highlighted certain resistance in operationalization in the status quo, especially in the aftermath of the recurring transactions. There are conversations pointing towards a change in the process management by the RBI. Some concerns that have been highlighted in the course of this discussion include integration of small banks in particular, and the entire supplier side system ecosystem as a whole, within the proper timeline, that is. Second is with respect to the stringent timeline itself, saying that this may be inadequate. The third is regarding the ambiguity with the circular itself and certain aspects of the circular, including the data storage norms, etc. The fourth is regarding the lack of cogent reasons highlighted by the RBI before coming out with this circular. Further, it has also been highlighted that with tokenization in itself, there is a necessity to dig deeper and see the need, and there is a need for standards that has been emphasized to ensure that all ecosystem players have a standard set for themselves. A few recommendations that have been highlighted include a need for increased interface with the different stakeholders. Secondly, publishing of a white paper and other documents for knowledge generation. It has also been highlighted that there is a necessity for a gradual and a tiered approach. There have been recommendations regarding the use of the sandbox, use of FAQs, and most importantly, the need for consumer awareness has been highlighted. We at CUTS can go on and on about the consumer-facing issues and the proposed regulatory way forward, and are committed to ensuring that consumers have a seamless experience, specifically when it comes to these card-based digital transactions. We have even drafted an open letter to this effect and have a project webpage on the implementing of the RBI tokenization circular in consumer interest. We will provide links in the chat window in the chat for this as well, and we will continuously be updating our website with the consumer survey results, the briefing paper, and whatever knowledge dissemination is required. It will be actively posted on our project webpage. We really encourage everybody to look into the same and have a look at these links so that the dissemination happens and the consumer voice reaches the right ears. Thank you everybody for joining in.
Thank you, Vidushi. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye. Thanks.
Thank you.